Hi, I'm Mark Rutten and welcome back to Nomad Boatbuilding. This is the second part of a two-part series in which I've got to repair my own work. About a year or so ago I built this small wooden boat, but I failed to choose the right products and application method when installing the keel on it. And under constant submersion, the epoxy bond holding that keel on began to break, and now I've got to fix it. Now you can go watch the first video right here where I investigated the problem and figured out a way to get this epoxy glued keel off the boat without wrecking anything. Yay! Today we're going to try and figure out a good repair strategy for putting this keel back on so that this problem doesn't happen again. So in last week's video about repairing the boat that I built, a lot of you commented about using Sikaflex or 3M 5200 to install the keel. And actually, I usually do that. I usually do exactly that. I honestly don't exactly remember why I chose to do something different this time. And my big mistake was just not using mechanical fasteners as well. WEST SYSTEM Epoxy is a really versatile product, and I feel like it's important to try and demonstrate that. And I also want to demonstrate that I still have faith in the WEST System products, despite the fact that this particular application of them didn't work out in the first place. So now that we have this off, we can see a few things. First of all, I've got zero bond throughout most of this keelson. I mean, it was on there, but it came off of there. Like, this epoxy has not stuck to the bottom of this at all, except for in a couple tiny spots right near the bow and right at the very stern. That tells me a couple things. Either A, I didn't prep the surfaces properly, or B, I chose the wrong product. And I think it might be a combination of the two. Now, I did sand these down, but perhaps I didn't sand it down coarse enough. But more importantly, I used WEST System's 105-205 resin hardener combination, which is perfectly fine for most applications. However, Purpleheart is considered to be an oily wood. So for that reason, I probably should have used G-Flex for this whole application. Before G-Flex came along, we were still gluing these difficult woods with the 105-205 resins and using good surface preparation as the tool to make that work. So I assumed it would. And clearly that wasn't the case in this particular situation. This Purpleheart just has too much resin in it. And I also think part of the problem was that this stock, it looks like it's essentially flat sawn. And when I lay a ruler across it, I can see it has in fact crowned this way on this portion of it. And over on this portion, it's got a cup to it. The fact that they moved is the thing that probably allowed this bond to start breaking in the first place. So I had a talk with the folks at WEST System. I gave them a call and talked to their tech department. They confirmed that this G-Flex glued scarf should have been fine. The ratio should have been okay, especially considering the whole thing was glued to a substrate. That was one reason I made this scarf joint as short as I did, because I figured the whole thing's reinforced by a large stiff backing member. So I thought that would be okay. Number two, perhaps I didn't abrade this quite coarsely enough. They recommend that you abrade it with 60 grit sandpaper going in line with the grain of the wood. And the tech department were looking at the photos I sent them, and they feel like this looks glue starved. I was careful not to try and squeeze the daylights out of this when I was gluing it up. I'm careful about trying to do that. That's one thing with epoxy, is you don't want to clamp things ridiculously tight. You want to leave some room for that epoxy in there. In my opinion, I left enough, and as evidenced by the fact that I can see a reasonably strong film of it here. However, clearly it didn't work. I do have a video about gluing up this very joint. It's called Make Wood Any Length with a Basic Scarf Joint. So you can go watch this video and see where I might have screwed up. The tech department noted in that video that I mixed my epoxy by weight 1:1, when in fact I should have mixed it 1.2:1. That means I had a hardener heavy joint, and hardeners, I've learned, are actually water soluble. So that might have been part of the problem as well. So where do I go from here? Now, I really like Purpleheart because it is tough, tough stuff. It can take grounding really well. So here's what I'm going to do. Rather than start from scratch, because that's a whole bunch of extra work, and I've got the skeg that would have to get fitted, most of this was fine. These portions down here are small, they're narrow, they're not going to move all that much. Not so much that they would break any bond. So we'll put the back half on here with G-Flex. We're going to do a long scarf, a 12-inch long scarf instead of 6 inches long, so we'll double the length of the scarf. The scarf joint is going to land within this range here where the original wood is still looking clean, and all this portion that's been exposed to seawater, that's going to get chopped away. And then the front portion, I think what I'm going to do is use a different material for the bulk of the keelson and cap it with some Purpleheart. So I'll use, say, I think probably sepili mahogany for the main portion. We'll glue that down with the 105-205, which is very adequate for that, making sure that we prep those surfaces really well. And then we'll add just a 1/4-inch cap of the Purpleheart on top to be the grounding shoe, and we'll put that on with G-Flex. The whole thing will get mechanically fastened down as well, just for good measure. So I think that's a great compromise that will fix this boat fairly quickly and efficiently, and uses products from the sponsor of this video, WEST SYSTEM Epoxies. One could make the argument I'm doing the same thing twice, but I'm not. So I'm reducing the volume of wood that the Purpleheart has, so it has less ability to move relative to the strength of the bond. I'm changing the adhesive I'm using that is hanging onto the Purpleheart itself and being much more fussy, making sure I do good prep work. I'm replacing half of that massive material with another species that I know bonds really, really well with WEST SYSTEM adhesive. First, we'll pop this outside into the sunshine where it has the best chance of drying up more before I start gluing it on. And in the meantime, we've got some prep work to do on the hull itself. So I think the Armadillo is the best tool for this job. It's just about perfect. So I'm just going to start by giving this thing a good lick down.
There's a healthy layer of epoxy still stuck to the bottom that was underneath the keel. I want to keep that there because obviously it hung on really well, but I do want to get rid of all the staining from that seawater that got in there. So I'm just going to focus on giving this a good thorough sanding with a coarse grit, get rid of all the staining from that seawater, and give us a good solid foundation to build upon. I'll give it a little lick for the longboard here too, just to make sure we got a nice fair surface to build on as well. And now onto the keelson itself. I'm going to use a coarse sanding belt on here and really focus on trying to clean up the whole portion of the keelson that we're going to reuse. The bit that got exposed to seawater, that's going away, so we don't have to worry about that. Just the back half.
Now Purpleheart, when it's oxidized, it's purple, but when it's freshly cut, it's kind of this very boring kind of brown color. So what I wanted to do there was get all the purple off, try and get it as neutral as I can get it, because that means I've got fresh, unoxidized wood there, and that's going to be the cleanest possible surface. Okay, let's get the scarf cut, move on to the next bit. I think what I'm going to do is give myself like an inch here, and then we'll go 12 inches. We'll square across. And then here we want just a 1/2 inch. We connect the dots. Still debating how I want to cut this. I think because of the height, I'll cut this on the bandsaw. And this we want to square across. Because my eyes aren't getting any younger, I sometimes will use tape to delineate that line just to make it easier to see. Okay, this all goes away, this stays. I should cut this haunch first. Just flip it over. Yeah, let's set up the table saw to do that. So this is providing a right angle for me to cut against, just to make it easier to handle this on the saw. Yeah, that came out a little squint, unfortunately. It's because this wasn't sitting quite dead flat against the bandsaw fence, I guess. I got plenty of length here, just shorten this up a hair. We make our piece that fits it a little bit steeper. Take that right across. This is really ready to go right on the boat. No need to worry about fussing around making the other half of this right away. I think we'll pop this on there. Maybe we'll just touch off where the screws go. And then I'll flag the drill bit and do a pilot drill. So we'll screw that down first. I always just use smaller diameter steel screws for doing my temporary fastenings. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to clamp down from the ceiling. There's the right drill bit. That comes off. Comes out. Stress off them. Okay, number 8 screw, 764 core diameter. Flag it. So I have essentially 1/4 of an inch. I don't usually flag off these guys. Okay, that is ready to get installed. So I think I want to just move right ahead with doing that before this gets spends any time staying exposed to oxygen. I have no idea if oxidization will affect the bond on this. I'd like to not find out the hard way. Working clean is so... well, I think it's important. I know that every time I don't work clean, I regret it. Every time. Something goes wrong that makes me regret not taking a moment to really tidy up nicely. Not screwing around this time. Using the acetone. I'm going to do it twice for good measure. I asked the tech guys whether or not the age of my G-Flex would be a problem. It's not that old, it's a few years old, but he said he'd tried stuff up to 8 or 10 years old, it was fine. So, how much am I going to need? So, 12 grams of each, something like that. Okay, so 0. Note the cup weight. 2.5. Tear. So G-Flex is the 650. There's a 655 as well. And if we're mixing by volume, it's a 1-to-1 mix. Hardener, resin.
Now I'm going to mix by weight, which has a different ratio of 1.2 parts resin to 1 part hardener.
Got your calculator. 13.1 times 1.2 is equal to 15.72. Tear. I'd always wondered why when I was using my G-Flex before and mixing by weight and going 50-50, that I was always ending up with like a little bit more resin than hardener, not realizing that by weight I should be going heavier on the resin.
Want to save yourself a ton of time? You make a little mixing wand like that. So we'll start on the keel itself, so it's got some time to soak in. So thinning your epoxies down for the purposes of penetration weakens them, so you really don't want to do that. If you really want to thin them down, you should be using a heat gun. And I would really seriously consider applying a heat gun to this to get this to penetrate better, except my heat gun died. I'm struggling to find a replacement heating element for it. I'd buy a whole new heat gun if I hadn't spent $300 on the one that I have, which in my mind is not the kind of thing you don't repair. I'm gonna butter this like I'm putting honey on toast. Do not want to skimp on this one. I want this to be the repair that doesn't need to be repaired yet again, that's for sure. Okay, now I just want to quickly skim out the bottom here. So we'll just take the tooth spreader and just work it a little bit. So here's something to know. When you use spreaders like this, if you go across the joint like I'm doing, it makes it easier for air to escape and improve your contact. Because if you get air bubbles trapped inside this thick gooey layer, it can hold up the whole thing. Drill. Okay. I'm just giving all these fasteners a little tease by hand. Make sure they're tightened as far down as they can go without being over tightened. Give it a little tap to help move things along. So when you do glue plugs, it's kind of helpful if you don't glue like the very bottom of it where you're screw fastening might need to be revealed without crap in it. And we always want to align the grain with the thing you're plugging, because if you don't, wood movement might cause the plug to move in opposite directions and cause it to want to pop out. And trying to eyeball the orientation of the grain on the plug is almost the hardest thing of the whole job. So another nice thing about G-Flex is it kicks off a little fairly fast. Well, fast in that you've got, you know, in about 3 hours or something, it's substantially cured. Okay, now I can mop it down. I forgot plugs back here. Luckily, we still have a bit of goop to clean up. Okay, we don't bother trying to clean up around the plugs. We just leave those and saw them off later, or sand them off later. Here's another thing I learned from the guys at tech support at WEST System. They asked me what rags I was using to clean off the surface of my wood before scarfing, and they recommend not using fabric rags because sometimes there's detergents and fabric softeners and stuff like that that the solvent will break down and can contaminate the surface of the part that you're trying to wet out. Okay, I think that will do it. So I'll get going on making my replacement section for the keel here. Just. Okay. Good. So close. So very close. Yep, I just need a little slight shave and we're home. We're running a little high, but I think I'm going to leave it alone because once it's installed, I could just slick this off with the belt sander, I think, and ferret down. Just lay out where our fasteners are going to go. Extra one in this scarf, just for good measure, I think would be a dumb idea. Okay, how far from the edge? Okay, now we're going to do a dry fit and drill holes. I sometimes complain about the low ceiling in this shop, but honestly, if I had a higher ceiling, I think it would cripple me. Okay, looks good. Okay, now for installing this, I'm going to be doing something a little bit out of the ordinary. So we're going to be using G-Flex on the Purpleheart as we did before, but then we're going to use 105, 205 resin on the rest of the joint. And one thing you can do with G-Flex, which is interesting, is you can use it in combination with the other adhesives. You need to mix the G-Flex on its own and the other adhesive on its own with the appropriate amount of hardeners. You can mix them together, or we could use them side by side, which is what I'm planning to do. Now, one of the reasons for doing this is because the G-Flex is considerably more expensive than the other epoxy, is one reason. So there's an economy component to this. The other one is it kind of demonstrates this particular technique. 12 grams. There we go. Zero that one. 12 times 1.2 is 14.4. Okay, now let's go and get some acetone onto the boat, onto the parts. Give it another swipe for good measure. And I'm going to hit the mahogany too, just because why not? Why not?
I have had an issue with gluing sepili just once or twice. I don't know what the problem was. Probably just glue starved, maybe. But let's just play it safe. We'll hit both sides of this. Okay, good. Now we'll mix up some 105-205 to wet this out with.
WEST Systems 105 resin is the foundational product for their basic product line. Then you combine that with your choice of hardener for the application. The 205 hardener, which I'm using, is the fast hardener. 206 is their slow hardener. 207 is their special coatings hardener intended for wetting out fiberglass cloth in situations where you're going to clear coat over top. You can also use that for just clear coating on its own. And then there's 209, which is an extra slow hardener intended for hot climates.
Flip this over. I am usually way cleaner than this. Oh my God, what a disaster. What a disaster. Okay. So what I think I'm going to do is I want to do one more neat coat on the hull as well. By neat, I mean unthickened. Then I want to do a slightly thickened coat between these components just to make up for stuff I can't see, but it's just going to be a little tiny bit of filler. Okay, so onto the hull. So there's one thing this experience has taught me is I should really sit down and reread all the WEST System product literature. Because what I thought I knew, I didn't know. Okay, so first piece. Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know, I just got this feeling like I want a little bit more underneath this scarf. Just a little bit more. And now the Purpleheart. First screw up here. Give everything the once over with a screwdriver. I would use the brace for this, but I don't actually want that much torque because
minimal holding I have on the screws. Don't want to risk popping one out. Okay, now we'll plug these holes. Got so much epoxy squeezing out of this hole back here. I can use that as my pot. The funny thing is, if there's a pile of epoxy in a fastening hole, you cannot get the plug into it to save your life. You gotta mop it out. Where's my Q-tips? Mop out the hole that's giving me trouble. Use it in the rest. Okay. Clean up. So these little toothed spreaders are great. WEST System 809 notched spreader. I use them a lot. But they do kind of start jamming up on you even when you clean them well. And so what I'll sometimes do is just take a little triangular file and recut the teeth just like you're sharpening a saw. Do that a few times before I toss them and replace them. So cleaning up you can do with a number of different solvents. Acetone, lacquer thinner. I don't like either of those because they're so smelly. So as you can see, I've only used the acetone for doing the for wiping down the wood. I really don't like the stuff. What I mostly use is denatured alcohol or methyl hydrate. You can use vinegar as well. If you really don't want to use the solvents, you can use vinegar. I just find it doesn't cut through the goo quite as nicely, is the one thing about vinegar. Well, there is a lot of squeeze out. Certainly did not skimp on the epoxy. That's for sure. So if I end up with like a larger amount of epoxy like this that is waste, I will put it outside, often in a bucket of water, like suspend it in water, just because the exothermic reaction on this could easily make this thing start smoking and essentially self-combust. So certainly don't want that happening in the workshop. I really am perplexed that I managed to screw this up so badly, I have to say. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of choosing the wrong product for the overall lamination, although I did choose the right one for this. Maybe a little bit it's the mixing of the epoxy on this, because I did a 1-to-1 instead of a 1.2-to-1 by weight. So that made it hardener heavy, so that could have been a problem. And then having material that is essentially flat sawn, but with a lot of power to it to break the bond. That obviously was problematic because this did change shape. It cupped, or it crowned this way. So it created a cup on the bottom in one portion, and in the forward portion it did the opposite because of the grain orientation. So the edges lifted up on the forward portion, which is where that bond started to break. So I don't think there was any one specific thing that I screwed up. I think there's a bunch of little factors that all came together to cause this failure. You know, and probably the biggest one is I should have used a few mechanical fasteners regardless. Not that I don't trust the adhesive products, I do, but you know, they have their limits. So what we've done is we've prepped our surfaces by properly sanding with a coarse grit, wiped everything down with acetone. The sepili layer underneath has been glued down with 105, 205 resin and hardener with a little bit of colloidal silica thrown in for good measure to make sure that any small voids are dealt with. The Purpleheart has been wetted out with G-Flex, and then it's been bonded
to the sepili, 105, 205 on the sepili, G-Flex on the Purpleheart, and a little bit of colloidal silica thrown in for good measure again. I've kept that colloidal silica component quite low just to make sure that there was minimum compromise to strength while giving myself just a little bit of gap filling ability, just in case. And then we've put some mechanical fasteners in, and we've left those in permanently.
She's launched, she's floating. Now I've not had a chance to row this at all since I built this boat. I'd say she rows quite nicely.
I want to thank WEST System for sponsoring this video, and I want to thank all of you for watching, and hope you join me again next month with another WEST System video. Ciao for now, folks.